Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. So today we're going to be covering inheritance, which is why we're starting a few minutes early. When it comes to inheritance, inheritance refers to when you pass away, what happens to your estate. That's a technical term, your property, your money, all of the things that you own. What happens to them when you die as a Muslim? Well, there are specific rules of distribution for inheritance, which has been specified in the Quran and by Islam. And this is a mandate. So a mandate means that you actually have to do it. These are not optional rules that you can do if you feel like, if you feel like it or not feel like it. This is something which Allah has prescribed for specific people. So there is room for some choice when we talk about what is known as a bequest or a wasiyah. And then in the general inheritance, there is no room for an option. You follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided for you. So every single Muslim has a responsibility to make sure that these rules will apply to them when they pass away, by writing a will or by doing anything. Now, if you live in an Islamic country, or if there was a proper Islamic country that distributes everything for you, as a Muslim, you have no obligation to worry about this. Because you die, all of a sudden, it's automatically going to be taken care of and it's not your issue. You don't have to worry about it. Just like if you die, for example, in a Muslim country, you don't have to worry about it because they're going to make sure that you're buried. They're going to make sure your body is washed. They're going to make sure that all the regulations apply to you. But if you live in a place where there are no facilities like that, then you have to make sure that it's your responsibility to make sure that you're going to get taken care of properly after you die. So for example, we talked about it before, that there are Muslims who recently accept Islam, or they've been Muslim for a long time, but their family is not Muslim or something. So when they die, sometimes they get buried into Christian graveyard, or their body is not washed, or their parents or their family members or even their spouse who may not be a Muslim, they want them to be cremated. So it's their responsibility to make sure that they've set it up so that they're going to be responsible, or that they're going to be, their body is going to be taken care of, and, their burial will be according to Islamic means. So the same thing applies to inheritance, that people need to make sure it's set up, that the inheritance is being distributed according to Islam. And the thing is, in the state of California, as far as I know, Governor Jerry Brown is not following the rules of Islamic inheritance. It's just that that's a general California policy, as well as in America, which means that we as Muslims have to write a will in order to specify how our inheritance will be distributed, how our body, usually the body is usually okay, but things like this. So it's really, really important that Muslims know these rules of inheritance, because they need to actually not only know the rules, but figure out a way that the rules will apply to their circumstance when they pass away. This system of inheritance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has devised has a number of wisdoms behind it. One of them is to spread wealth throughout the society, not just among one person or one person or two people, but there's a specified way to spread wealth when you pass away. If you didn't have a system of inheritance, what would happen? Right? Imagine money went nowhere. Right? Obviously, if the money was buried with you in your grave, what would happen? You just lost that wealth from society now. Right? You'd have some kind of deflation of wealth or whatever it may be. A second thing would be if there was a system where you simply decide who you want to give it to without any regard to the laws that have been prescribed. Then what would happen is people would be specifying the one or two people who they really want it to go to, and now the wealth would not be distributed properly within society. So that's one wisdom. The second wisdom is it strengthens the family system in a society. So because what happens is the people who get your inheritance according to fixed shares are your closest family members. And what happens is, by the fact that they're getting part of the inheritance also strengthens the family within the society. Otherwise, people say, well, why do I need family? Why do I care about family? And it's all about me, and it's all about me and my spouse, and the family doesn't matter. So it makes family matter as well. Not only, it's not a way of buying them out, but it's a way of showing a sense of care and loyalty to them. The way it works is this: The family members in a society are supposed to be helping each other in a normal family. Now we have a breakdown of the family system, so there are problems. But in a normal family, family members help each other. Right? They don't fight with each other. They're supposed to be there to help each other. The thing is, it makes sense that the ones who are helping one another after their death, they're also getting part of the inheritance back because they were helping the family. This strengthens the family system both ways. So it's a pay-in from an economic perspective. You're paying in the sense that you're cooperating as a family. And it's a payout in the sense that when you die, you're also going to receive part of the inheritance so you can continue the family tradition of helping each other. Another thing it does, another wisdom, is it reminds people that they are not fully in control of their wealth. Especially when they die, their inheritance will be distributed a certain way. It's not like, well, people feel in their lifetime, I earned all of this money and it belongs to me and I could do whatever I want. I can withhold from whomever I want. I could give to whomever I want. Because charity is optional, right? Outside of zakah, charity is optional. So this gives a reminder to people that, you know what? You cannot just distribute your wealth however you feel like. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set certain things, and it shows a sign of obedience to Allah, and also it kind of shows a restriction of your own, your feeling of control that you have over your wealth. The shares that are distributed are specified to particular relatives, for the most part, which we're going to see. So certain shares, this person is going to get 1/4, this person is going to get 1/8, this person is going to get, 1/3, 1/6. These shares are specified. Now the thing is, why are they specified? There's a wisdom behind it too. So why does this person get 1/4 and this person gets 1/8 and this person gets 1/6? The reason is because they're specified towards each relative depending on what other relatives are present, so that there can be no disputes among family members of saying, hey, why did you favor that person? I helped you more in your lifetime. And they say, that's so unfair, this other person is getting more. When the shares have been specified by Allah, no one can come and say, hey, well, why did you choose that person over me? And this is very common in families when people distribute whatever they feel like. So now you can say, well, it's not me, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's Allah that chose this. And He chose this distribution, so no one can argue with that. Right? So it blocks disputes, it blocks the animosity that will arise among family members. And this is so common. You find people even, killing their, family members or something like that because of an inheritance dispute. Why did you leave half the wealth to that brother? I've always served you. And they say, no, well, that brother was, more loyal to me or whatever it is. These things don't exist in Islam because most of these shares to close relatives are fixed and they cannot be modified. So inheritance is not left to the individual to decide however they feel for the most part. Spouses are also included as family members. So this is not a common question because in America, most of your inheritance or all of your inheritance will be going to your spouse. That's the way it works. But if you didn't have this rule, people would kind of think and say, well, when you say close family members, spouse technically has no direct blood in common with you. So if there's no direct blood, why does the spouse also get this share? So the reason why the spouse is included along with the close family members is because it shows you the sanctity of the marriage contract, how important the institution of marriage really is. Otherwise, many societies in the past, they've excluded marriage. Your inheritance goes to your blood family members. Your wife and your husband, they're not blood. So therefore, they're excluded from the inheritance as well. So it shows you the importance they also get included because technically, the marriage can be terminated. So if a woman or a man inherits as a spouse, and then all of a sudden, you don't know if that person was to survive, 1 month later they might have been divorced. And if they got divorced, they're not entitled to any inheritance anymore. So it's a breakable relationship when it comes to marriage. Family bonds are unbreakable. The blood is there, the family cannot break apart. So spouse was included, and it's important to understand why the spouse was additionally included. Not by norm or by the general rule. Spouses are included as an exception to the rule because they don't have blood, but the reason is to show the importance of the marriage itself. Each heir will receive a share that's going to be in accordance with their general needs and their general responsibilities. So why this person gets 1/6, why does this person get 1/8? Why not the other way around? Or why shouldn't this person get more, this person get more? The wisdom behind it and the reasoning behind it is because these are not just arbitrary numbers that were thrown out there. These numbers represent what people generally need in societies across the world, in a universal standard, and also it represents the responsibilities that those people will generally have in a society, especially in an Islamic society where people are practicing Islam. If you focus on it as only being one perspective in terms of necessity, what do you actually need? Well, you say this system doesn't make sense because this person is only receiving 1/8, and she, her financial circumstances dictate that she needs more than that. And Islam is not giving us any room or any room for giving her more, because it's specified the share. If you look at it from that narrow, restricted angle, you're going to have a problem because you're not looking at it the holistic picture. Number one, laws are general. They're for the general populations, and exceptions are exceptions. Exceptions don't make the rule. Number two, it's not just in line with what people need due to their personal circumstances. It's due to general circumstances of need, and also the responsibilities that Islam places upon those people. So to give you an example, a son, for example, would receive the double share of the sister, right? The son and the daughter, right? The son is going to receive a double share. Why is the son receiving a double share compared to the sister? It's not only because their needs, it's also due to their responsibilities. Because if you apply Islam completely, the husband or the man is going to be responsible for a lot of things. When they get married, they're going to be responsible for taking care of the family. Last week we saw another example of responsibility, right? Which was in what example? Paying the blood money in terms of murder. Who's responsible? The males, right? They're responsible for paying. And there's so many other examples. So if you apply Islam as a whole system, and then you see the wisdom behind it, that makes sense. If you say, okay, we're just going to isolate this one little rule, we're not going to apply anything else in Islam, and all of a sudden we're going to go ahead and say, hey, this could have been tweaked. This doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't make sense because you didn't implement the entire thing. You didn't see the whole picture. So you have to zoom out and see the whole picture in order to see the wisdom. Okay, now I want to point out one common thing, and I want everyone to really pay attention to this point. It's such a common statement that's mentioned all the time that in Islam, males will always inherit more than females. Right? And females do not get the same level of inheritance. And this is, quoted here and quoted there and all of that. And this is not a true statement. It's not a true statement because when you hear that, usually people will say, well, that's just superiority for males. This is misogyny, and this is showing that, this is male-dominated society and this and that, and all these other, things. Let's just take one simple example, and you're going to learn how to do this calculation later. Let's take an example here. A woman dies. She leaves behind her husband, male, her father, male, and a daughter, okay, female. Now what's going to happen? The husband is going to get, does anyone know what it is? Husband gets 1/4, okay? The father gets 1/4, and the daughter gets 1/2. The daughter just got double of each one of these, each double of the father and double of the husband, yet she's a female. So does it mean that in all circumstances the female is getting deprived? No. It's only when it's on the same level. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why it's on the same level, like we talked about responsibilities in terms of having to pay for certain members. So this idea of the females are deprived and the males get everything, the females don't get this, that's not true at all. So if anyone tries to throw that at you, just use this example, because this happens all the time. I see random people going on, BBC, some good brothers, going and talking, and someone will throw one of these statements out there and they don't even know how to respond. They don't know how to respond because they didn't take a CIS class, unfortunately, right? But the thing is, these are activists who are, mashallah, doing debates. They're very prominent figures speaking to the media. And when something like this comes, you see them completely dumbfounded. They don't even know how to respond. So it's very important you learn how to respond as well. That's why we're covering some of the theory. Man-made laws regarding inheritance. So today we have, every society has their own laws of inheritance. Most of them, or almost all of them, are man-made, meaning that people came up and they decided, well, this is what's best for society, or this is what's just. Man-made laws have never been able to find a proper balance in distributing wealth in terms of inheritance. Let's take an example. In the past, who's been deprived From our understanding, who's been deprived in the past of inheritance and money and property and all of that? Women. The most common thing, everyone says women have been deprived. And that's true. They've been deprived. So in Roman Empire, for example, they were not able to inherit. In fact, they were not able to own property. In India, ancient India, women were not allowed to inherit. In ancient China, women were not allowed to inherit at all. In Greek society, women were not allowed to inherit. Ancient Babylonian society, women were not allowed to inherit. So Islam comes and says, hey, women are going to be inheriting. Right? So it comes and it adds this thing. But now you say, well, see, people, they were so extreme in the past. They completely neglected women from the entire equation of inheritance. That's so bad. And you know, and it's true. It's true. They were deprived. But today, in today's society, who's deprived now? Who gets the inheritance according to American law? No, by default, if you don't have a will, who does it go to? Besides the government. Right? It's going to go to the spouse. Right? So now who's deprived? Kids are deprived. The parents are deprived. Right? So where's the balance now? Right? Because the concept of family in American philosophy, right, in the idea is its understanding is that the real family is husband and wife, and the parents and everything, they're kind of dispensable. You're 18, you move out, you have no responsibility towards them. You're mature now, and they can help you pay off your college loans or something, and then they're done with. You don't need them anymore. Put them in a retirement home, and you move on. And it's their job. They should have been saving up with some life insurance policy, or they should have been, investing. Otherwise, hey, they're messed up. And the kids, that's their own issue. They don't worry about these things. So the thing is, there's never been a real balance that has been attained in the past. Whereas Islam, when we look at it, if we always try and focus and say, well, why not like this? Why not like that? You look at what Islam is actually teaching, and it shows you a proper balance in society. You see extreme in one way and extreme in another way. So we cannot understand 100% of the detailed wisdom of every single fraction, every single instance. But at the same time, when you look at it as a whole, you see the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in these rules in terms of balancing distribution throughout. So women were, they were deprived in the past, and today parents, other relatives, children are generally getting deprived in terms of the default policy. So that's the first part. Then we move on to bequest. So bequests, known as wasiyah. So wasiyah, bequest, specifically refers to directives, right? Directives that are made by a person who's living. So you're writing some directives down concerning what's going to happen after you die. All right? That's generally the concept of bequest. But this usually refers to property. Right? So we're going to primarily focus on the property aspect rather than the health aspect. What happens to my body? Do you unplug me if I'm in the hospital or something like that? So when it comes to the wealth aspect, you're allowed to distribute up to 1/3 of all the wealth that you have by bequest upon your death. So what that means is you write a bequest in your life. You don't know when you're going to die. So you write a bequest and you say, look, I want to distribute 1/4 of my property to IIOC, and I want to distribute another 1/20th to Islamic Relief, for example, and I want to distribute another 1/100th of it to my best friend. He's always been there for me, and I know he needs it, and he's kind of poor and everything, so I'm going to distribute upon my death. So this is what's known as a bequest. Okay, so this bequest is allowed in Islam, but it's allowed up to a limit, and the limit is 1/3. So there are a lot of rules concerning the bequest or the wasiyah itself. No, well, because will is a little bit different. So bequest is a type of will. In American system, bequest is like a will in a sense. But we're talking about two different things. So there's inheritance and bequest. So inheritance is what's going to be distributed whether you like it or not. And bequest, you actually have some choice in the matter. Okay, so this is the difference in Islamic law. So it's allowed to distribute up to 1/3. It's not allowed to bequest wealth to someone who's already going to be inheriting from the person who's deceased. So someone who's already going to receive a fixed share, you cannot bequest to them. Now why would that be? That defeats the purpose of the whole fairness, right, thing. Because now you say, well, you know what, you're supposed to get 1/8, but I'm gonna throw another 1/3 at you. That's going to be a problem, right? So that's the whole wisdom behind it. And the only time it's allowed and this is a rare case, where if all the other heirs consent to this type of bequest, then it would be allowed. But that means without force. We're not talking about you go and you take the kids, and you like bribe them with some candy, and you go to the other brothers, you put them at gunpoint, you say, look, you're going to sign this bequest because I'm giving out 1/3 extra to the other person. This means like completely willing, right? So this is the exception to the rule. Whoever buys, sells, now this is a kind of a rare case, but it's kind of important for you to know some of these other side issues. Anyone who buys or sells or gives wealth away during their final illness. Remember we talked last week about the final illness, the terminal illness, where you only know that's a terminal illness if you actually die. Right? You don't know it until you actually end up dying from that illness. If anyone is transacting or doing something during that time, then that type of transaction counts as the 1/3 of the bequest that's going to be shared out. Now let me explain why that is. The reason why that is, where is it? Right here. The reason why this is when people are in their terminal illness and they feel like they're not going to recover, sometimes they make hasty decisions. And they start gifting people, and they start, selling, things, and they start buying random things or whatever it is. They're not 100% in their state of mind. But at the same time, you can't say that someone who's in their final illness cannot make any transactions anymore. So there's no hajar. Remember we talked about hajar? Limitations on legal competence. You stop someone from transacting. You can't say that we put hajar on this person and we stop them from transacting, because that would be unjust in case they are in a state of mind. Like they can make certain important life decisions when they're in their final illness, their terminal illness. So in this case, what happens is, if they do something along these lines, it gets counted as being part of the wasiyah itself, in order to draw a balance between allowing them to transact, and the other side of the balance is not depriving the other people of the wealth. Because imagine someone on their terminal illness says, you know what, they get really scared and they're about to die, they feel like they're about to die, and they actually do die, and they say, you know what, okay, I'm giving all my money away in charity, and they give everything away. Okay, who's going to be deprived now? The heirs, right? All the heirs that we're going to be inheriting. So the thing is, that's why when it comes to something like this, because people don't make the 100% rational decisions during this time in order to protect and balance things out, this is why it will be counting as wasiyah. So you say, I'm giving out all my property. Actually, you can only give up to 1/3 of the property during this final illness. No, it'll be from the property of the other people who are going to receive the wasiyah and the 1/3. So they got to split it. So you can't get deprived of people who have already been put into the bequest in the first place. Yes, from the whole. From the whole property, yes. Total of 1/3. Right? Bequest also can be recommended. So far we talked about bequest. If you feel like giving a bequest, you can. You don't have to. There's no obligation to do so. There's no need to do so. But it can be recommended to have a bequest if you're going to be leaving some of your wealth to people who are poor, people who are needy, or people who are righteous, in order to help them. So it's recommended that if you find that these categories of people are kind of being neglected in society, it's something actually good to write into your will in order to help those people. Okay. There's one case where it's absolutely necessary for you to make a bequest. And if you want to know that case, you read the footnote on the notes. All right? So I'm not going to mention. It's a very rare case. It is prohibited to make, so it's also haram to make a bequest if it's going to cause harm to the heirs, or if the money is going to be used in acts of disobedience. So you're going to go and give it, say, this brother or this best friend of mine, I want to, leave him some money from bequest. And you know that he's going to go and spend it in like drugs. So you're not allowed to do something like that. So that's one issue. And the second issue is, if you're doing it or it's going to be causing harm to the heirs and they actually need that money because they're not so well off, and you say, well, I want to deprive them and I want to just give it to somebody else, you should not be doing it in order to deprive them, even of their 1/3, because they need that extra 1/3. So that's not something that's allowed in Islam. And you cannot, Allah will hold you accountable for that. You can't be stopped according to the law, but you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Continuing with bequest. Bequest can be made to anybody. Meaning that it's not restricted by the general rules of inheritance. So the general rules of inheritance, as we're going to talk about, is that it only goes to Muslims, vast majority opinion. But when it comes to a bequest, you can give it to anybody. You can give it to a Muslim or to a non-Muslim family member or non-family member, as long as they're not already inheriting. So there's no specific rules on who you can give it to. Right? Now don't take this too strictly. Right? It doesn't mean that you can leave money like to your dog and stuff like that. This is American culture, right? You leave like 1/3, to your dog to get some special grooming at Beverly Hills or something like that. Not in Islam. The bequest can only be made by an adult. So if you make a bequest and you're a kid, and then all of a sudden you grow up and you're mature now and you have wealth to leave behind, or even if you die when you're young and you have money in your will, your bequest cannot count because you made it when you were a kid. Right? So if you're a 10-year-old, right, and you have not reached maturity and you have $1 million which you inherited from your grandparents or something, you cannot write a bequest and say, I'm giving all of this money to my best friend because, we trade, gummy bears, all the time, and I'm going to leave all this money to him. You cannot do that because it wouldn't be fair. The bequest may be retracted at any time before you die. So once you make it, you can always retract it any time as long as you've not died. When the person in the bequest actually dies, then the bequest is automatically invalidated and you don't even need to retract it because they don't exist anymore. So it's going to be removed. It's just considered cancelled. You can bequest to a fetus. You're allowed to bequest to a fetus before the fetus is actually born. So if there's a child in the womb and it's going to be born in 4 months or something, you can actually bequest to that child. In case you die, it's going to go to that child. But what you cannot do is you cannot bequest to someone who doesn't exist. And I actually got this question last week. They say, I want to bequest to my 3rd great-grandson, who is not born, but is going to be born in like 100 years maybe. Okay, you cannot do that because you don't know if they're going to exist in the first place. And if they don't exist, they don't come into existence, what happened to that wealth and that distribution? So it's been blocked. So you cannot do something like that. Because what you'd have to do is you'd have to set it into some side account in order to make sure that in case that person gets born, it gets distributed and the money is going to be blocked by everyone else. So that's blocking wealth, so that's not something that's just going to be allowed. The bequest may stipulate a condition. You can actually put a condition in. So if you tell your kids, if you graduate from the College of Islamic Studies, then you will get 10% of my wealth. That's the condition of the bequest. You can actually put that in there. So it can be conditional. And if they don't get that thing, and it doesn't happen to them, then they're not going to get that level of wealth. So you don't have to redo your bequest again. So the exception to the rule is, if the person who is appointed to get some money by bequest, if they killed the person who made the bequest, even if they accidentally killed. Remember we talked about 3 types of killing, right, last week? And even if it's the unintentional, accidental killing, the bequest is not valid anymore. Right? Because why is that? You say, well, what if completely accidentally, I was loading the gun while we were hunting and I shot the person. And it just so happened that they bequested a certain amount of wealth to me. Because when we say it's an accidental death, that's an exterior judgment. That's an external judgment that we're judging. To our best knowledge, it seems like an accidental, unintentional death. But at the same time, we don't know the reality. So Islam wanted to protect people because this is something which is very dangerous. Someone's going to bequest you money and you think, you know what, maybe they're going to remove me next year because the other person is nicer to them or something like that. There could be some foul play there. So it tried to block people from even contemplating any type of killing, to make sure it doesn't even happen at any level, to block them from the bequest itself. And this is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. An executor. So you should be appointing an executor to the bequest who is sane and mature. Executor means this is the person who's going to undertake the distribution of the inheritance and stuff for you. Now the executor of a bequest doesn't only apply to money. It applies to other things, like for example, who's going to take care of your children afterwards. All right, so that you have an executor, the person can handle your debts, for example. So they're going to be paying off your debts, and they're going to figure out a way to sell some of your property and make sure that it gets distributed properly. If you were to appoint somebody who is not trustworthy as your executor, what can happen? The judge, the Muslim judge, can actually overrule that person and appoint another one. Which means what? Which means this is not purely an act of worship where no one can interfere. So when you say, I want this person to distribute for me, if it happens to be not in the best interests of the estate and the people involved and everything, then the judge has the authority to override it. So the reason why we're mentioning some of these things is we talked about judges and judgment and all of that. So the judge has certain authority sometimes, and the judge doesn't have authority sometimes. So in these cases, the judge has the authority to overrule some of these things. Like we talked about marriage. The judge has the authority to invalidate marriages, right? Without any type of divorce or any type of, khula or something like that. So there's a political aspect to Islam where these things can be overruled because they're not pure acts of worship, right? They're, I don't know what the right term is, but they're acts of worship which have an objective. And if the objective is not going to be met in the society, the judge can overrule something like that. So let's talk about inheritors. Who's going to inherit? So the person who is deceased, right? We're going to call the person who's, giving out the money, the person who died, we're going to call them the deceased. We'll keep the D in mind. Okay, we're going to see some charts. So the deceased person as well as the heirs are the ones who receive the money from the person who died, who is deceived. The deceased as well as the heirs, they will receive a portion of wealth through inheritance, right? And they need to meet certain conditions before the rules of inheritance can apply. So there are certain criteria that need to take place. Okay, here are some of the criteria. So the deceased, the person who died, must be pronounced dead according to one of the following methods. There's actually 3 methods, but we're going to talk about 2. One of them is actual death. So in order for inheritance to be transferred, this is a person's money being transferred to somebody else. You actually have to die a real death. Now what is actual death? Actual death refers to bodily death. Bodily death is defined right now generally by most Muslim scholars as when your brain ceases to function. All right, so what they call brain death is generally considered to be actual death. Okay, now this is something that's still being debated among Muslim scholars for other topics. When do you unplug somebody from the machine or something like that, which we're not going to talk about. But just keep that in mind. There's actual death. So if somebody looks like they're almost dead, or somebody's brain is still alive, but they're plugged into the machine, and they have, for example, they're breathing through the help of machines or something, and someone says, well, it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's kind of like this person's already dead. So now does their wealth transfer over? It doesn't transfer over until they're pronounced actually dead. And the definition for that is a little bit of a gray area, but that's important because you find people who are sitting in comas for 7 years. And if they were pronounced dead, then all their money was given away. And then they wake up 7 years later and they're still alive and they live another 20, 30 years. So what? They lost everything because somebody pronounced them dead? So it's very important to understand the deceased must be pronounced actually dead according to certain criteria. So that's number 1. Number 2 is legal death. So legal death is different than actual death. Legal death means that, for example, simple example is somebody is missing. Right? Somebody went off to battle and they got lost from the army, and now all of a sudden we don't know where they are. How long do you wait until they come back? 6 months have passed. No one has heard from this person. So either the person is dead, or the person's been captured and is sitting in a jail or something, like prison or something, or the person just moved to another land and no one knows where he is and he's enjoying his i'tikaf, seclusion or whatever it may be, right? So the thing is, what do you do for this person? Do you keep their money locked up in case they return, or do you say, well, no, it's kind of, they're probably missing now, they're probably dead by now. So there's a certain way of determining how long you wait. And we're not going to cover that, but there's a certain way. So the judge will declare the person legally dead. So now the person's legally dead, their inheritance gets distributed. Now what happens is if they were pronounced legally dead and all of a sudden, Castaway, Tom Hanks thing. So all of a sudden they show up. They're like, hey, look, I'm here. and the family's moved on and everyone got remarried and everything. Now what happens to this guy? Well, it's your problem, we thought you were dead, so, find a job and, make your way back up. No. So what happens is if the guy turns up alive, what do you do now? He is entitled to take back whatever wealth is left in the possession of the heirs. So whatever was distributed and still remains, he's allowed to take it back. So it's all about balance. The question is, if you said that the heirs have to pay him back everything, even if they spent it, now they might have to go into debt in order to pay him back. So that wouldn't be fair for them, right? But at the same time, it wouldn't be fair if he got nothing back. He said, well, you died. He said, well, I didn't die. I was captured as a prisoner, and now I come back 1 year later, and all of a sudden I have nothing. This is what you guys do to me. This is my welcome back home present. So you have to balance out things, and alhamdulillah, Islam has showed us what that balance actually is going to be. So the balance is that they get whatever remains, but there's no debt upon the people in order for them to pay off all the stuff that comes back. When it comes to the heir, in order for the heir to actually inherit, the heir must be alive for at least a moment after the demise of the deceased. So you must be alive at least for a moment. Right? So if the heir died at the same time as the person who's deceased, or it's unknown who died first, right? So they're aboard the Titanic and it sunk, right? So now they both died, right? So the question is, which one died first? If you can figure out which one died first, then you can do something about it. One guy is found, drowned, and one guy is found on the raft and he starved to death, right? So which one died first? Probably. Yeah, the guy who drowned most likely died first. You can, do a check or something, right? But if you can't tell, there's two guys and they're lying both on the raft and they both died, right? Then which one died first? You don't know, and one is the inheriting from the other one. Why is this important, right? You say, well, okay, if the guy is dead, why does he care if he inherits in the first place, right? He's dead anyways. Because he's also going to be having heirs, and he's going to be passing off money. So the question is, does this person act as an heir for this person, such that money is transferred from him to him, and then this money is also retransferred back to his heirs or not? That's what the real question is. So the thing is, if one person lives even a moment, so for example, imagine, I know I have very weird examples. Imagine there's a shooting squad and all of a sudden this guy shoots this guy and then he goes and shoots the other guy. Right? Technically, that guy lived longer than this guy. So his money would transfer over first to him, his share. Then this guy's share would transfer over to his family. So his family would be getting a portion of the first guy's share as well. All right? Depending on how it was going to be distributed. So you have to be alive for at least a moment after the demise of the deceased. If you have an heir that's a fetus in the womb, so you have an heir that's not been born yet. So are they considered heirs in the first place? Yes, they are. All right? Because you're going to be distributing. So if there's a fetus in the womb, what you do basically is you take the larger share. See, in the past, right, or in many countries today, they still don't know whether it's going to be a male or female, right, for a long time, up until the baby is going to be born. Or there's even a time where you can't figure it out in the first few months or something like that, right? So you're trying to figure out, if this is a male or a female, it's going to differ what the inheritance is going to be. So what you do is, there's a lot of opinions on this. We're going to take the opinion of Abu Yusuf. He said, set aside the larger share during the distribution of the property. So once you set aside a larger share, whatever it might be, then what you do is the judge will take a guarantee from all the other heirs and say that in case more than one child is born, what if there's twins or triplets? It's going to affect the inheritance of everyone else, right? So what happens is the judge takes a guarantee that in case more than one child is born, you're going to give back some of the money that you've inherited in order to redistribute it back to those twins or those triplets or quadruplets or whatever it may be. So the judge takes this guarantee and they have to return the monies back. Once the child is born, then the remaining wealth will be distributed. So basically there's two ways to do it. One way is to distribute to the heirs, right? And ask them to give it back in case more children are born. So this will work. Another way is, when it comes to the whole male-female thing, you have to figure out what to do. So what you do is you reserve the larger share. Any heir that is not going to be affected by the existence of this child will be distributed their full share, and the other money will be blocked and kept aside until the child is born. Right? And then what happens is, in case it happens to be female of the same line, then the money will be redistributed back to the other heirs. Otherwise, the money will continue on to the child. So you have to figure out which one to do. Right? And in many societies, they can't go for like a lab test and try and figure out all these things. So you have to wait a while. So that's the opinion of Imam Abu Yusuf. Like the bequest, the person who participated in the murder of the deceased, okay, even if it's unintentional murder, or even if it's a justified murder, they're excluded from being an heir. So they're excluded from the bequest, and the murderer in any way is excluded from being an heir. So what does that mean? That means even if you are a Muslim judge, okay, you're a Muslim judge and you're an heir to somebody who is on trial for murder, and you are the judge who accuses them, or who gives the verdict that this is murder and they're going to receive retaliation and they're going to be killed with capital punishment in the process, you are now excluded from receiving your share of inheritance as well. Why? To prevent foul, because the judge, right, might have made the decision and said, this could have been an unintentional murder, a semi-intentional murder, or an intentional murder. And if they might have been inclined, if there was a lot of money coming to them, that, you know what, this is somewhere between semi-intentional and intentional. Let's go with intentional. Because if they're going to be killed, then my inheritance comes to me now. Because you know what, my kids have been asking me for the Mercedes, and you know, I'm just tired of hearing it every day. Let's just get the money and just be quiet, you know, just get done with. So the thing is, to prevent foul play, they're also going to be excluded if you have any way, any hand in committing the murder of this person or killing this person. Right? Lastly, two people of different religions will not inherit from each other. So why I say different religions? I told you in this class sometimes I throw in things that have to do with non-Muslims living in a Muslim society, just to give you an understanding. So when non-Muslims were living under Muslims and they were, you know, going to courts of Islamic law to distribute things, for example, like we saw the example of the Magians, right? When we talked about, did we talk about the Magians? We talked about the incest and the double inheritance. Okay, well, we'll talk about it now. So basically, people of two different religions cannot inherit from each other. So non-Muslims who are living under an Islamic state, they were not supposed to be inheriting from people of their own different religions. So a Jew would not be inheriting from a Christian would not be inheriting from a Jew, and likewise with the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Right? So two people of different religions would not inherit, and the reason is because people used to identify themselves primarily based upon their religion. That was like a grouping that was made. And it's not some kind of like stigma or some kind of, you know, racial profiling or something like that. It's not about race. So the world has changed, so it requires maybe some reflection for you to fully digest that statement or fully understand it. But the more you reflect upon it, the more, you know, it makes sense, the more you read up on it. However, there is a different opinion. So the opinion of Muawiyah, Ibn Taymiyyah, and Ibn al-Qayyim, they said that this only applies to non-Muslims who were at war with the Muslims. So this is a minority opinion, but it's an opinion nonetheless, right? And this is a question that comes up on a regular basis, because there's a lot of converts, for example, who say, well, you know, if I'm not supposed to inherit from my parents, right, and they've kind of, you know, not really supported my conversion to Islam anyways, so am I not allowed to inherit from them? So Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion, Ibn al-Qayyim's opinion was that you can inherit from them. What about vice versa? So there are some opinions there. Which one should we follow? As I mentioned before, we're still working on that local Southern California Muslim Scholars Council to come up with which one we should be applying in our society right now. So I don't have a detailed answer for you at the moment. But the European Fatwa Council and one of my teachers they issued the fatwa according to Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim. So anyways, rights on inherited property. Okay, what are rights on inherited property? This means that before any money can be distributed in inheritance, there are certain other obligations that need to be fulfilled first. So let's say you die and you leave $100,000 and your children and your wife and your parents, they're waiting. And they're saying, okay, you know, I really need to pay my bill and I'm hoping the inheritance comes. And it's going to be $100,000 that you died with. Okay, so my share is going to be, let's say, 1/4. So I'm expecting $25,000. Well, sorry, that's not the way it works. You cannot expect $25,000. Why? Because there are other rights. So what are the other rights that precede the rights to inheritance? Number one is if the person who died possessed any collateral. Remember we talked about collateral? Anyone remember the Arabic term for collateral? Huh? Rahan, right? So collateral that's in the possession of the person that died has to be returned. Why is that? Because collateral is there for a specific reason. You gave up your watch, or you gave up your car or something as collateral for a business transaction or for a loan, right? So the person who gave up the collateral, before that collateral is distributed to the heirs and you say, oh, well, you know, this guy bought his car. Okay, who would like the car? You can have half of the car and you can have the other half. The car still belongs to the guy. He gave it as collateral to you, right, in order to get a loan back. So he has to pay the loan back, but he gets his collateral back. So collateral has to be returned first before inheritance is distributed. Number two, funeral expenses must be paid, which means that the funeral expenses are paid by who? The father, the parents, or the kids? The deceased. Good. The deceased. So it's the person who's dying who's actually going to be taking the burden of the funeral expenses. It's not the family's primary responsibility. So if they run out of money, because I've had this happen before. I've seen people calling and saying, you know what, there's this family and you know they cannot pay for the they cannot pay for the funeral, and can somebody help and can we collect money? And when we investigated and sometimes it's legitimate. When we investigated one of the cases, so you know what, these people were about to inherit a ton of money from the guy, but they did not want to take the money away from the deceased so that they don't take away from their own inheritance, and they started asking other people to help. Primary responsibility is on the deceased person themselves. Number three, the debts have to be paid off. So the first thing is the guy needs to be buried, obviously. The third thing is the debts have to be paid off. So the question is, who gets precedence? The people who loaned this person money when he was alive, or the people who are his heirs? So the answer is, first priority goes to the debtors who loaned him some money. So they need to be paid off. So imagine the guy had $50,000 in loans. There's only $50,000 left for the heirs. And you say, well, that's more than 1/3. So it's not bequest. Bequest is up to 1/3. This, if the entire thing is down to $5,000, so be it. Because you have to decide who gets precedence. And Islam teaches us precedence goes to the people who paid him, who gave him money when he was alive. Then you distribute the bequest. So the bequest comes after all of this. So if you had a bequest saying 1/4 of my property goes to my best friend, that's only after the debts and the funeral expenses and everything is paid off first. You subtract all of that, then the 1/4 will come from that remaining amount. And then once that's out, then the inheritors will actually start inheriting the wealth itself. Okay? Now who are the recipients? And yes, we'll take a break soon, inshallah. So don't worry, just try and stay focused. We'll take a short break soon. Recipients. There are three categories of people who are going to be inheriting. Category number one are those people who will receive a fixed share, meaning they're going to receive a particular fraction. This is how much they're going to get. They're going to get a certain amount. Those people include, among the males, the husband, the son, or the children, male sons, grandson, or descending. Now you have to try to understand this, even though I'm not drawing it out for you yet. You have to try to understand this on this level, that grandson or descending means anyone who's going down the level, but they're of the same type, meaning they're also a male going down, because we're talking about males so far. So the males descending down, and there's no intervening females in between them. To be grandson, but through males going through. So that means descending. Father, paternal grandfather. What does paternal grandfather mean? Father's father, right? So there's paternal grandfather and there's maternal grandfather. Maternal grandfather would mean mother's father, right? So going through the lineage. So you understand the terms paternal and maternal, right? So that you have to, I know some people are not too familiar with these, so just so you get it. Or ascending, or going up, but through a line of males with no intervening female. The brother, okay, the son of a brother, right? The son of a brother who's from the same father, not just the normal son. Son of the brother, what is the son of a brother called? Nephew. And the paternal uncle, what is the uncle? Dad's brother, right? So paternal uncle from the dad's side. And the son of a paternal uncle. What are the sons of a paternal uncle called? First cousins, right? First cousins. Dad's first cousin. Yeah, so it's still considered first cousin. Or first, there's a term for it. Anyways, you look it up during break, okay, inshallah. Females, the wife, the daughter of a son, the mother, grandmother, and the sister. Okay, and going up the line of grandmother and daughter, of a son, depending on who's in the line. The second category is those relatives where there's no female entering in the line between the deceased. So you're related to the person who's deceased by how many people in between? One person in between or two people in between. There's no female intervening in between you and the deceased person. So this is category number 2. This is just kind of theoretical so far. Category number 3 is the opposite of that. That relatives which are connected through females. So there is a female intervening. And those ones who will inherit as the son of the daughter. Right? So the son of the daughter of the deceased. So intervening between the son and the deceased is a female. The daughter of the daughter, so there's a female in between, and the maternal grandfather. Maternal grandfather refers to mother's father. Yes, mother's father, okay? When it comes to the fixed shares that these people are generally going to be receiving, they are for the close family members, as we mentioned, and the spouse. So what are the fixed shares? This is important for you to know. At least know what kind of ratios Islam is giving out to people. There are 6 fixed shares, very, very easy to remember. First one is 1/2, okay? And then you start cutting it in half. So what is 1/2 of 1/2? 1/4. What is 1/2 of 1/4? 1/8. That's all you have. The second share is 2/3. What is 1/2 of 2/3? 1/3. What is 1/2 of 1/3? 1/6. All you need to do is memorize 1/4 and 2/3. And then you half them twice. Easy, right? Okay? So you have 1/2, and you cut 1/2 in half, you get 1/4. You cut 1/4 in half, you get 1/8. So you have 3 shares that arise from 1/2. That's starting from 1/2. And the other 3 shares starts from 2/3. Half of 2/3 is 1/3. Half of 1/3 is 1/6. So you get 2/3 branching out to these things. So just remember 1/2 and 2/3. And then you half them twice. Half, 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 half. And this will make for a very good multiple choice test question. Just letting you know, letting you in on that one. All right. Now, this is not the only way to inherit through fixed shares. There's another way to inherit, and that's through the residual. What's known as the residual or the leftover money after all the fixed shares have been distributed. So for example, if somebody inherits 1/6, another person inherits 1/4, how much is left? Is there any money left? Where does that money go? Does it go into the grave with the deceased person? Or does it go to the government? Or do you say, well, this person got 1/6, this person got 1/4, let's just up their, let's just give them extra. It depends. Okay, it really depends on the circumstance. But sometimes anyone who's inheriting through residual, whatever's left over, they get all the leftover. So one person is getting 1/4, and the other person is getting the residual property. How much are they getting? One person is getting 1/4, and the leftover is 3/4. Okay, so those of you who are, who had a tough time calculating that one, after break we're going to go over it. But I would suggest start practicing during the break. Okay? Decrease and exclusion. Now this is another important thing to know before we start getting into the calculations. Okay? So the shares which are being given to certain heirs depend on how many other heirs are alive. Alright? So if you say, well, this person's supposed to get 1/2. It's not always 1/2. So the 1/2 can decrease to something else. So let's take an example from the notes here. A husband is supposed to get 1/2. So the husband of the deceased wife is supposed to get 1/2 of the property that she leaves behind. However, if there are children present from the couple, then what happens? His share gets cut in half and it becomes now 1/4. So this is known as decrease. So the husband should have gotten 1/2, but because there's kids, the kids also have a right to the inheritance. So in order to balance it out so the husband doesn't take too much, his share gets cut in half and he goes down to 1/4. Okay? So that's known as decrease. Someone may also be excluded completely. So that they don't just decrease, they go down to 0 and they get nothing because of the presence of somebody else. Usually that's going to be in the same line as the person, because they're considered to be a closer relative and they block the other relative. So this is known as either exclusion or blocking. Like you're blocking somebody else from receiving the inheritance, and you don't get upset about it or something like that because you're far distant from the relative. For example, the son of a brother will be blocked by a brother. Alright, so you have a brother, and then you have the brother's son. So if that brother was not there, the brother's son, who's known as the nephew, would be inheriting. But because the brother is there, now all of a sudden, that person who's more distant through that same line is going to be blocked. Obviously, it's hoped that the son would not have like animosity towards the father, that he's going to get inherited instead of him. But that's the way it is. So there is decrease and there's exclusion, and that's what makes inheritance a little bit more tricky. So when I hear this all the time. Why do we got to attend an inheritance class? It's so easy. It's just in the Quran. The Quran tells you what the rules are. You just know the ratios and everything, and you just calculate it. I'll give you a few examples. Give them a few examples when we're done with this class. So, okay, you take the Quran. I'll give you the pages of the Quran from inheritance. You sit with the entire translation or translation tafsir and everything, and I'll give you 24 hours. Try and calculate it just from the Quran. Guarantee you won't be able to do it, especially if the tougher cases. So anyways, the rules are there, but you need to know how to do it, and you need to know a few more things. That's decrease and that's exclusion. So there's a few people who get blocked. There are 6 people who will always get something, and they never get blocked. So 6 people can never get blocked. What you have is number 1, the son and the daughter, father and the mother, husband and the wife. These are what's known as the closest relatives, or the priority relatives. So you have husband and wife, the spouse category. You have parents and you have children. Right? So you have to kind of visualize it in terms of parents. I'll draw this out for you after the break. So you have parents, you have children underneath, and then you have the spouse kind of on the side. Right? So if you kind of envision this, it kind of makes a little bit more sense for you. Okay, residuary. Residuary is a male who is related to the deceased without any intervening female in the line. This person may inherit the residual amount. May inherit, okay, in certain cases. So these are the main residuaries. Residuaries can be children, they can be parents, they can be full or paternal siblings. What is a paternal sibling? Or what is a sibling? Sibling are the descendants of the parents, kids. And then there's uncles. And the uncles are the descendants of the grandparents. Okay, so if you're getting lost here, don't worry about it. You're not behind. This is a little bit theory here. Priorities of residuary. So who gets priority in terms of getting the residuary? The closer relatives will be given priority. Whoever's closer to the deceased. But now what about children and parents? Who gets priority? Who is considered over the other? Because they're both equally related, right? One of them is above one line and one of them is below one line. So who gets priority? Children have precedence over the parents. So they get priority. The second priority goes to people who are closer in the same line. So for example, a son will get precedence over the grandson because the grandson is one line further, even though they're in the same line from the deceased. And the third is the strength of the relationship. Third priority, strength of the relationship. So the full brother will get precedence over a half brother, for example. This is just pretty easy to understand, right? You have a full brother and you have a half brother. Who's going to get precedence? The full brother. Full sister, half sister. Who's going to get precedence? The full sister, right? So you have full brother means, or full sister means that both parents, you're from both parents, right? You can also have a brother from the father's side. You can have a brother from the mother's side. All right? And if you're not used to, hearing all this, how in the world can you have a brother from the father's side? Because men don't have children. You just share the same father through a different marriage. Right? So that's the way it works. So which one do you think is going to get priority in terms of the rules of inheritance? It's going to be your sibling through the same mother or through the same father? Are you sure? Why same father? Okay, you're going to see it. I'm going to leave it to you to figure out. I'm going to ask you at the end of class. You'll see it. You'll see it when we come back to it, inshallah. So if no one inherits through fixed shares, no one inherits through fixed shares, no one inherits through residuary, you have no family. There's almost no close family that you have. They all passed away. What happens in that case? The money goes in the grave with you? No. Then in that case, you have other relatives who will inherit that money, and that's going to be according to the following priority. This is a rare case where you have nobody. You have no kids, you have no parents, you have no brothers, you have no one. So in that case, the descendants which have no intervening female in the line will get precedence, number one. If there's a male, then the parents which have no intervening female will be getting it. And we're not going to look at these cases in detail, and you don't need to know these cases for the test. So just relax, inshallah. If there's a female, then parents that have no intervening female in between, then it's going to go through the male line. Okay? And then you have the next category are children of the full or the maternal brother. So these are the certain, clauses where no one else is inheriting. These are the people who will inherit. And then you have children of the full or the paternal uncle side. Okay, so this is a very rare case. This you leave up to specialists. Inshallah, and they're going to, handle that part for you if there's no one else to inherit. This formula sheet is something that I've just kind of summarized all the rules for you, that this could be inputted into like a computer program and it'll just literally process it through. You don't even have to understand the whole thing and you can figure out how to do it. So we're going to go over this after the break and take practical examples on how exactly you start calculating inheritance. And through this formula sheet, you will realize which person is going to be getting what. So for example, when you see the father in the formula sheet, it's saying that, look, if there's a male descendant, then the father is going to be getting 1/6. Right? If there's a female descendant, the father is going to be getting 1/6 plus remainder. What does remainder mean? Residual, right? The residual. And if it says otherwise. Right, this is like computer science language. I apologize for that. That's my major. Otherwise meaning else statement. Meaning if there's no male descendant and there's no female descendant, then what is the father going to be getting? The residual. Right? So that means if there's no kids, then the father gets the residual. Why did this rule and this rule come first and this rule come last? Because this is the order in which you want to start checking to make sure you've calculated all cases. Usually what happens is, this inheritance is generally taught by saying, the father will get the remainder or the residual. And then it says, unless they have one, male descendant, then they're going to get this. Or so they flip it around. And the problem with flipping it around is, if you look at the first case, you don't know whether or not you should move on to the second case or not. In this way that I've written for you, the moment you find out one of these conditions applies, you stop and you don't need to read the rest anymore. So you're reading and you say, father, okay, there's a father here, good. If there's a male descendant, then the father is going to get 1/6. I don't need to read the rest of this anymore. Stop reading, write down 1/6, move on to the next person. Do I have a wife? Oh, there's a wife remaining. Okay, now the wife. If there's a descendant, what does a descendant mean? Children, male or female. If there's a descendant, then the wife is going to get 1/8. Okay, stop. I don't need to calculate anymore. I don't need to read the rest of this. Because you say, well, it's so easy. There's only 2 points. So now you go to the daughter of a son, the granddaughter, and you see like there's an entire like half a page in terms of when she's going to inherit and how much she's going to inherit. This is the cases where you really want to stop reading at the top. One of them applies, stop, good to go. You don't need to worry about it anymore. So this is kind of to simplify things for you. Inshallah, I've checked most of it. Hopefully it should be correct. So during the break, if you want to get a handle on things, try and look at this a little bit. Take 1 or 2 examples yourself before we get to the break and see if you can calculate them. So I'll give you like a few test cases. Take if you want to work during the break a little bit, here are some test cases for you. You have a husband and a full sister. You have a husband and a paternal sister. And you have, let me give you a harder one. You have a wife, 1 sister, 1 paternal sister, and 1 maternal sister. See if you can figure out that during the break. And you'll have a head start. And then if you're like lost and confused, then you'll appreciate what we're going to do after the break a lot more, inshallah. Alright, so we have some test cases now. So we're going to start looking at these test cases which are here in your notes. And then we're going to go through some of these by hand so that you have an understanding of how to do them. Now to keep a few things in mind. First announcement is that someone had an interesting question. Is that I'm never going to use these rules because I'm not likely to inherit anything because none of my family members are wealthy. And I'm not, and I said, well then you have to write a will yourself. So I'm never going to write a will because I'm not going to be rich. Right? First of all, you should not have that mentality because Allah can do whatever you want. Right? He can do whatever He wants. He can give you wealth. Second thing is, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you have $50, right, in your thing, you're supposed to be distributing. That's still inheritance that's going to be going to some people. So regardless of how much wealth you have, that's still money that's going to be going to a certain group of people. So inheritance should be distributed regardless of whether you have a lot or you have a little bit. Even if you have $100, you should make a will. Otherwise, it's not going to be distributed properly. Okay, assuming that your burial is taken care of, right? Then the $100 that's left will go to somebody, right? It'll either, we're going to teach you how to write a simple will. And if you want a more complex will, then the $100 will probably go to your lawyer instead. Let's do some calculations, okay? You have a husband and a full sister. Just watch this, inshallah, watch this. You have a husband and you have a full sister. So what you do is, imagine this in your mind now, right? There's the deceased person. Let's draw a little box. This is the deceased, okay? The deceased obviously had a father and mother, right? Beforehand. Father, mother, okay? From this father and mother came what? You have a sister here, right? This sister is full because she's coming from the same father and mother. So these are people on the top, these are sister on the side, right? Related to the deceased from here. Now what happened is you have a husband. Where did the husband go? Okay. She married this guy. Right? So now the fact that you have a husband, that means that the deceased is what? A female. Right? You would hope at least, right? Okay? In California, you never know, but you would hope. So now, Islamically, this is the way it's going to be. So, the father is now deceased as well. The mother is deceased. She is not there anymore. You have a husband and you have a full sister. Right? This is not just a sister, this is FS. Full sister. Now the question is, what happens to them and what are they going to be getting? So what we do is we look at our formula sheet here. Alright, so we pull out our formula sheet and we have number 1, husband. So let's find husband. Father, mother, husband. Husband says if there is a descendant, then the husband gets 1/4. Right? So is there a descendant here? Does the deceased have a descendant, which means a child, a son or a daughter? There's no son or daughter here, right? So that's not the case. Otherwise, the husband gets. So we got 1/2, right? This is for the husband, and we're done. That's clear. Husband's getting 1/2. Now we have to figure out what happens to the full sister. So let's go. We're looking page number 2, full sister. Okay. if there is a male descendant. Is there a male descendant? What does a male descendant mean? Son. Is there a son here? No. Or a grandfather or father. Is there a grandfather? Is there a father? No. Next case. If there is a brother, is there a brother here? No. If there is a daughter, is there a daughter here? No. Otherwise, okay, if there's only one, okay, how many full sisters are there? One. So the full sister gets 1/2. All right? Now you do a double check. 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. Okay. But we're going to see more complicated examples. So now let's clear this. Move on to the second example. Second example is you have a husband and you have a paternal sister. You have a husband and you have a paternal sister. Okay, so deceased. Deceased has a husband and a paternal sister from some parents somehow over here. Paternal means only from the father's side, right? So technically this was related through the father, not through the mother. Okay? Mother and father are deceased. Right? So we see what's going on over here. Now we want to calculate this. So what we do is we go back to this formula sheet. We have a husband. Okay? Husband, is there a descendant? There's no descendant. Otherwise, the husband gets 1/2. So husband gets 1/2. We have a paternal sister. So now we look on this sheet, page 2, paternal sister. If there's a full brother, is there a full brother here? No. Or 2 full sisters? No. If there's 1 full sister, is there 1 full sister? No. Otherwise, she's going to inherit like the full sister. Okay, so now what is the full sister? Now we go up to full sister. If there's a male descendant, is there a male descendant? No. Is there a father or grandfather? No. If there's a brother, is there a brother? No. If there's a daughter, is there a daughter? No. Otherwise, there's one of her. Is there one? Yes, she gets 1/2. So there we go. The paternal sister gets 1/2. 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. Inheritance is distributed. All right. So if you had $10,000, how much does the paternal sister get? $5,000. Right. So these are easy, right? So far. Right. We're following so far. It's, alhamdulillah, it's the easy part. Now watch what happens. No, no, inshallah, it's still going to be easy. So now we take a few different examples. You have a daughter and a sister. Okay, deceased. Okay, daughter is down here. Call it her D. And then you have a sister over here. So when we say sister, do we really usually default to full sister or half sister? Sister generally means full sister, right? So full sister. Okay, now we got to figure out, okay, they're somehow related through parents here. Now figure out, okay, what happens here? So you got daughter. You go back to your sheet. Okay, somebody help me now. What should the daughter be getting? 1/2. Why 1/2? Who can explain it? There is no male descendant, and therefore there's only one daughter. Therefore the daughter gets 1/2. What about the full sister? The remainder. Okay, so now you look at daughter here. Now we're getting an example of remainder. The full sister, okay, if there's a male descendant, which there's not, grandfather, no, father, no. Is there a brother? No. Is there a daughter? There is a daughter. If there's a daughter, what does she get? She gets a remainder. So what you do is you write R. This is a very simple one. So what you do is, if there's a remainder, what you do is, you see so far, the inheritance is 1/2. So what you do is you go 1 minus 1/2. 1 minus 1/2 equals 1/2. Now you all know that because we're talking about a half, which is 50%. It's easy to calculate. If you didn't know how to do this fraction because I gave you a more tricky one, how would you actually do this math? So let's do it in a simple one first so that you don't get lost in a complicated one. So how do you figure out what is 1 minus 1/2? So what is 1 actually equal to in terms of fractions? You have 1 and you have a 1/2. Here's the rule. Keep this in mind. When you want to add or subtract fractions, right? You have to have the same denominator. So the top number here is called the numerator. The bottom number is called the denominator. So what you need is you need to put them on the same denominator. So what is 1 equal to in terms of a fraction? 1 actually equals 1 over 1. That's what 1 is equal to. And you're saying 1 over 1 minus 1 over 2 equals, and you're trying to figure it out. Now you have 1 over 1 minus 1 over 2. You cannot add or subtract because these two numbers are not the same. You have a 1 and you have a 2. So what you need to figure out is what we call the least common denominator, LCD. You have to figure out what is the least common denominator, which means these numbers here, the number 1 and the number 2, what is the smallest number that both of them can divide into? Okay, so this one's easy to figure out. You say it's a number 2. So we already have the number 2 here. We just need this number 1 right here. We need to make this a number 2. How do we get this to be a number 2? You multiply by 1. Right? So what you do is, here's the thing. I know. I'm sure. So what you do is, any number times 1 equals the number itself. So 3 times 1 equals 4,765 times 1 equals 4,765. So what you do now is you multiply this number, because you're trying to adjust the bottom, you multiply it by something which is equal to 1 in order to get the number 2 on the bottom. So what you do here is you say, okay, I have 1 over 1 and I need the bottom to be a number 2 somehow. So what you do is you multiply this by 2 over 2. Now what is 2 over 2? Any number that's divided by itself equals 1 in mathematics. Okay? So 2 over 2 equals 1. 3 over 3 equals 1. 3,400 divided by 3,400 equals 1. So any number, you multiply this, and what happens when you multiply? This is not adding now. So see, these numbers on the bottom are not the same. There's 1 over 1, 1 on the bottom and 2 on the bottom. You can multiply different denominators, but you cannot add or subtract different denominators. So now that you're multiplying, you say 1 times 2 equals 2. And 1 times 2 equals 2. So now you actually ended up with the number 2 over 2. Okay? So now you say, I want this to substitute back for what this was originally. So now you write 2 over 2 minus, and what do we have here? 1 over 2. So 2 minus 2, 2 over 2 minus 1 over 2. 2, now you can subtract directly. 2 minus 1 equals 1. And 2 minus 2, you don't subtract here. You leave the denominator the same, right? And what are you left with? 2. You leave the denominator, you just subtract the numerator only when you're adding and subtracting fractions. So far so good. You know, this is a pretty simple one, but if you needed a little review, there's your review. Okay, so, calculator is not going to be as nice. It's not as clean because you don't get the perfect fraction. Right? So, what is 1/3? 3 point? How many 3s? Okay, so do you add a 4 anywhere, somewhere there? Someone's going to be deprived of a few bucks, especially if we're talking about a multi-million-dollar estate. You're getting deprived if you add a 4 or you don't add a 4. So it's more precise, it's fractions. So let's clear this. We're good to go so far. Let's look at the next example. A lot of these you can figure out yourself. They're quite easy. Let's take a tougher one. You can do some of these on your own at home. I gave you the answers too. So the answers are there on the sheet. Let's take a wife and an uncle. Let's do one more with 2 real quick. If we have time. Yeah, we have some time. A wife and an uncle. This is going to be easier. So forget the diagram. Okay, we got a wife, we got an uncle. How much is the wife going to be getting? How much is the uncle going to be getting? So that's the question. We default to what kind of uncle? Paternal. Okay. So we have a wife. So you go to wife. Is there one descendant? No descendant. So the wife is going to get 1/4. Uncle. So where is the uncle? You go and you find the uncle. Where's the uncle? Yeah, he's not here. Okay. So now the uncle is automatically going to be getting the remainder because we talked about residuaries, right? So in this case, you're supposed to know that he's going to get the remainder. The wife gets 1/4 and the uncle gets the remainder. So what's the remainder here? How did you figure that out? So what you do, technically you do 1 minus 1/4. Now I'll just do it real fast. 1 minus 1/4, which is technically equal to 4/4 minus 1/4, because this is equal to 1. 4 minus 1 equals 3. And you're left with 3/4. Good? Okay. Move on. Something with 3, right? We have a wife, daughter, and an uncle. Okay, so you have a wife, daughter, and uncle. So what is the wife going to be getting? You go back to the wife. Is there a descendant? Yes, there's a daughter. So if there's a descendant, what does the wife get? 1/8. Right? 1/8? Yes, 1/8. If there's a daughter, there's a daughter. What is the daughter going to be getting? If there's a son from the same father, is there a son from the same father? No. If there's one daughter, she's going to be getting 1/2. And the uncle is going to be getting what? Uncle gets the remainder. Now we need to figure this out. So we got 1/8, 1/2, and we got a remainder. So what do? First thing we need to do is we need to add 1/8 and 1/2. So how do you add 1/8 and 1/2? 1/8 plus 1/2 equals what? We need the least common denominator. What is the least common denominator? 8. So we need to figure out a way to get 1/2 to be a number over 8. So what you do is you multiply by 4, multiply by 4. 1 times 4 equals 4. 2 times 4 equals 8. So you get 4/8. And then you have 1/8 plus 4. You get 5/8. Okay, now you go 1 minus 5/8 to get the remainder. And what do you get? You have 8/8 minus 5/8, which equals 3/8. So you have 3/8 for the uncle remaining. Okay? So we're good. Let's take another example. Mother, sister, and uncle. Let's try this one. Okay. Mother, sister, and uncle. So we got a mother. Is there a descendant? No. Is there more than one sibling? There is a sister though. But the sister counts as how many siblings? One sibling. If there's only a father and a spouse, is there only a father and a spouse? No. So this is one example, one exceptional case. So it's been thrown in there in the equation. There's not only a father and spouse. So the mother is going to be getting what? 1/3 or 1/6? But it's one sister. So it says here, if there is a descendant or more than one sibling. Not one or more siblings. More than one sibling means 2 or more. Right? So technically she's getting 1/3. Sister is getting what? Where's the sister? Sister means what kind of sister, by the way? Full sister. So is there a male descendant? No. Is there a father or grandfather? No. So she's not blocked. Is there a brother? No. Is there a daughter? No. She's getting then half. 1/2. And the uncle is getting remainder. So now you have 1/3 and 1/2. So you go 1/3 plus 1/2, which is equal to, now you need least common denominator of 3 and 2. So the easiest way to find the least common denominator is by multiplying these numbers. 3 times 2. You figure out the number, that's one way of doing it, and then you try and reduce. Okay, so 3 times 6, so what do you have here? Multiplied by 2, multiplied by 2, you get 2/6, plus times 3, 3/6, which equals 5/6. So 1 minus 5/6, do the math, you're going to get 1/6. Okay, so uncle's getting 1/6, mother's getting 1/3, sister is getting 1/2. Now what you do is, in this case you don't need to double check because you already have the 1 minus 5, 6. So you don't need to double check and see if they add up to 1. You know that they add up to 1. Right, so if you wanted to double check it, you add 1/3 plus 1/2 plus 1/6 and make sure they add up to 1. If they don't add up to 1, you have a problem. So you need to figure out something what to do. Right? So let's take another few examples. Here we go. This is a little bit trickier. Number 17. Okay? You have a husband and you have 3 sisters. Okay, husband and 3 sisters. What's going to happen? So the husband, you go to the husband and you say, okay, is there a descendant? No. Okay, so therefore the husband gets 1/2. Now there are 3 sisters. Now we go to sisters. Now here it gets a little bit more interesting. These are full sisters, right? Okay. If there's a male descendant, is there a male descendant? Is there a father or grandfather? Is there a brother? Is there a daughter? Okay. Otherwise they're going to get what? If there's 1, they get 1/2. If there's more than 1, they get 2/3. How many sisters here? 3. So they're going to be sharing 2/3. Okay, so now we got some fractions to deal with, right? So you have 1/2 and you have 2/3. So these 3 sisters are going to share in 2/3. Okay, so what is each one of them going to be getting? Before we even do that kind of solution here, what we do is we try and figure out what's going on here. 1/2 plus 2/3. What's 1/2 plus 2/3? So you multiply by 3, and you get 3/6 plus, multiply by 2, 4/6, which equals 7/6. Uh-oh. Too much got distributed. So now we have a problem. What happened? Inheritance was over-distributed. Because 7/6 means that you have 6/6 plus 1/6. 6/6 equals 1. That's 1 is like 100% of the money the guy has. There's an extra 1/6 here. You have to do something about the 1/6. So what do you do when there's extra? And the question is, why is there an extra? So let me just give you a few things here. So some people have said, well, this is a proof that the Islamic system of inheritance is flawed. Okay, it's flawed in the sense that, some people say, I've heard this in debates before, Allah couldn't add and the Prophet didn't know how to add and blah, blah, blah. They knew how to add very well. The thing is, when you have something that's overly distributed, all you need to do is redistribute 1/6 among the people. Why would something like this happen? Right? Is there an error in the math or something? No. It's only an error if you don't know how to figure out how to redistribute 1/6 back among 4 different people. That's your problem. You don't know math. The reason why this is there is because when you proportionately redistribute it back to people, what does it mean? It means that their proportion was 1/6 divided by the number of people who are going to be inheriting. So it's proportionately redistributed back. But the question is, how do you redistribute it back? Do you redistribute 1/6 back equally among 4 people, such that each one of them, if you were to redistribute it back equally, how much would you redistribute back to per person? 1/6 by 4 people. You would multiply it by 1/4, so you get 1/24. So is 1/24 redistributed back to everyone? No. Why not? So 4 people in the equation, right? 100% of the money that person left over, there's extra money, right, that needs to be redistributed back to a total of 4 people. How do you redistribute it? If we redistribute it equally in terms of each of them gets 1/24 from the 1/4 that's, or the 1/6 that's remaining, each of them would get 1/24. Is that fair? Why is it not fair? Right, so it's not proportional to what they were originally getting in the first place. Husband was getting 1/2 and the other people were getting 1/3 of the 2/3. So you have to redistribute proportionally. It's not that all of a sudden they're just going to get equally shares now. So now the question is, what do? So what you do is you go back to the notes. And now we cover a new part, which is under here. If you printed your notes or if you looked at them online, it's called adjustments. These adjustments are known as 2 things. One of them is called rad, or returning back, and one is called aul. So these are 2 Arabic terms which are really important. So what happens is, it says if the fractions add up to more than 100% or less than 100% of the entire estate, you need to make an adjustment. In this case, is it more or is it less? It's more, right? So it's more than 100%. So if the shares are greater than 100%, you adjust the shares, which is called aul. This is called aul. So you adjust the shares by, in the easy way of doing, I just explained to you what you're going to be doing. The easy way to do this is you replace the denominator with the numerator of the entire estate. That's it. You replace what's the denominator? The bottom number. You replace it with the numerator of the entire estate. Okay, so where is that? You have 7/6, right? So we came up with this number here. Everyone seeing that? 7/6, right? Okay. Our fraction here was what? We have 1/2, right? Plus 2/3, right? When we did 1/2 plus 2/3, we got to what numbers? We got 3/6 plus 4/6. Okay. What do you do in this case? You replace this numerator here. See this one right here? I'm circling. Yes. This numerator is what number? 7. Okay. With the denominator of the equation. What is the denominator of what we have so far? So these 6's turn into 7's. What are we left with? 3 over 7 plus 4 over 7, which equals 7 over 7, which equals 1, right? So it equals 1 in the end. So now we don't have a problem. So this 3/7 is going to who? Who was originally getting, there's no uncle here. So who is the 3/7 going to? The husband. So husband is getting 3/7, and the 4/7 is going to who? The 3 sisters. Okay? So now you redistribute it back. So what you've done is, by replacing the numerator that you got here, because this is the original number, with the denominator, all you've done is you've reduced the entire, the estate. Okay, the estate that's left over, you've reduced the quantity of it proportionately back to everyone else. That's all you need to do. So you're left with 3/7 and 4/7. Now the only thing left is 4/7 goes to 3 sisters. Right? So let me clear this. You have 4 over 7 going to 3 different sisters. So what do you need to do in order to get that fraction? You multiply by 1 over 3. Okay? Because you want each of them to have a third. So what is 4 over 7 times 1 over 3? You get 4. 4 times 1 equals 4. 7 times 3 equals 21. Can this be reduced at all? No, you can't reduce it evenly, right? So each sister gets 4 over 21. So in the end, what happens? Sister number 1 gets 4 over 21. Sister number 2 gets 4 over 21. Sister number 3 gets 4 over 21. And husband gets, who remembers what the husband was getting? 3 over 7. This is SSSH. And this equals the entire thing. Now, if you want to double check your math to make sure that you didn't mess up somewhere, you should always double check. So what do? You add all these up together, and what should they equal? 1. So now you have 4 over 21 plus 4 over 21 plus 4 over 21 plus 3 over 7. Now the thing is, you need least common denominator. So what is the least common denominator? 21. So the only thing, this check means I don't want to rewrite what's on top. Okay? Check. My dad does this in his business. Plus, how do you get this to be over 21? You multiply 7 by 3 and you get over 21. And since you multiply by 3, you multiply 3 by 3 and you get 9 over 21. So now you add them up and you get 9 plus 4 is 13. Plus 4 is 17. And 17 plus 1 more 4 equals 21. So we have 21 over 21. We're good. We have 1. Everything is great. Inheritance has been distributed correctly. Alhamdulillah. And now we have more cases to continue with. Alright? So now let's pick another one. This one will be good. Alright, you have a husband. Number 18. Husband. You have a paternal sister. You have a maternal sister. And you have a sister. Full sister. I'll call her FS. Right? So now, let's take a look. We have husband. Okay? Is there a descendant? No descendant. So the husband is getting 1/2. Paternal. So before we go into paternal and maternal sister, you always look here. You start with the full sisters, because it's going to be easier, right? So you go to full sister. Right? And she's higher on the list as well, right? So full sister is going to get what? Right? Is there a male descendant? No. Is there a father or grandfather? No. Is there a brother? No. Is there a daughter? No. So is there one? Yes. So what's she getting? Half. So now we go to paternal sister. So let's take a look at paternal sister. If there's a full brother, is there a full brother? No. Is there two full sisters? No. Is there one full sister? Yes. So what is she getting? 1/6. Paternal sister is getting 1/6. Now we go to maternal sister. If there is a descendant, is there a descendant? Male parent? Male parent? No. Male grandparent? No. Otherwise, is there only one? Is there one? Yes, there's one. What is she getting? 1/6. Okay. So now we have these nice fractions. Now we add this up together, we get 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/6 plus 1/6, which equals what? Equals 1 1/3, right? Okay, so you could manually do all of that in your own time. So you have 1 1/3, okay, which is technically 4/3. 1/3 now, you're over, you need to redistribute it. So 1 1/3 actually equals 4/3. So what do? You take this numerator, right? And you add, you make this numerator go into this entire equation. So technically we'd have to do this thing properly. So what do you have? Make the halves into sixths, which equals 3/6 plus 3/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6. And in that case, you got 3 plus 3 equals 6, plus 1 equals 7, plus 1 equals 8. You have 8/6. So that's the way the fraction was. So 8 is a better number than the 4. 4/3 is equal to 8/6. But it's better to bring it up to the least common denominator. You take the number 8, which is called the numerator, and you replace the numerator with the denominator of the other fractions. So all of these 6's turn into, so you just modify your pen here, and these all turn into little 8's here, and 8. And we're done. That's it. So here you go, the number, whoever had a half, now the husband gets 3/8. Paternal sister gets 1/8. Maternal sister gets 1/8. And the full sister gets 3/8. Right? You add them up together to double check, and you're going to find that 3 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1, 8/8 equals 1. Good to go? Following? Good. Alright, now moving on, let's take some trickier ones. 29. Wife, 2 daughters, father and mother. Okay? So now we got the wife. So what do we do with the wife first of all? You go back to your sheet. Is there a descendant? Yes. So the wife gets 1/8. There are daughters. Okay? If there is a son from the same father, is there a son? No. Otherwise, if there's one daughter, she gets a half. Is there one daughter? No. There's more than one daughter, so they get 2/3. You don't have to start in order. No, you don't have to go in order. Father, so let's go to father. Is there a male descendant? No. Is there a female descendant? So now what does the father get? 1/6 plus the remainder. So we got plus R here, residual or remainder. Okay? And then we take the mother. And the mother, is there a descendant? So the mother gets 1/6. Mother gets 1/6. Now we have to figure out, okay, who's getting what here? So now we got 1/8 plus 2/3 plus 1/6 plus 1/6, and we need to figure out what this remainder is. So we need to upgrade the father's status and give him some more money here. Right? So here, what do? What's the least common denominator of 8, 3, and 6? 24. Okay? So the way to figure that out is you multiply 8 by 3, you get 24. Sometimes you have to experiment. You get into the habit of figuring out what the least common denominator is. If you mess up and you go too high, right? Let's say you did 8 by 6. 8 times 6 is 48. And you did the entire fraction over 48. Right? What do? You're not going to be wrong. You just need to reduce the fraction back down afterwards when you're done. So it's not the end of the world if you mess up on the least common denominator. So what you have is over 24. Right? Everything's going to be over 24. So how do you get 1/8 over 24? Multiply by 3. So you get 3 over 24. How do you get 2/3 to be over 24? You multiply by 8. So 8 times 2 is 16. How do you get 6? Times 4. So you get 4 over 24 plus 4 over 24, which equals what? 4 plus 4 equals? 8 plus 3 equals? 11. 11 plus 16 equals? Well, what's 11 plus 10? 21 plus 6? 27. We have 27 over 24. Okay? So we're over now. So what do? Change all these 24s to 27s. And poor dad gets what as his remainder? 0. Dad gets nothing as a remainder. And then he starts looking at other people and saying, these people have deprived me from their inheritance. But then he stops and he remembers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered these shares. Therefore I cannot get upset at anybody else. Huh? He still got a 6th, but his extra that he might have wanted has been deprived from him, but he cannot get upset regarding that because it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. Right? So there, we're good to go on that. Now this, if you know Arabic, then you would, and you have an iPad or an iPhone, because for some reason this is the only, I think, downside of having Android, is you don't have this amazing program called Al-Mawarith. And the people who wrote this, mashallah, is one of the best Islamic apps I've ever seen made that's so comprehensive, user-friendly. If you know Arabic, so what you do is you choose, is this a male or a female? You choose male or female. And these are all the people who can inherit. So you say Zawj, which means husband. Say how many? Is there a Zawj there? Yes. Put Na'am, which means yes, we got one husband here. Okay? Is there a mother? Yes, there's one mother. Naam. So there's a mother there. Okay? Is there a father? Yes, we got a father. And we have one daughter. So let's say 2 daughters. You put in the number 2. You got 2 daughters. Halul mas'ala, which means calculate. And boom, it calculated for you. What happens? 2 daughters are getting this distribution. 4 over 15. Okay? The mother is going to be getting 2 over 15. Father, Zawj, husband is getting this. This person is getting this, and is giving you the details. Did I choose this guy? I didn't even choose these people. Okay, anyways. So maybe they were chosen from before in the previous example. Anyway, so these guys are not getting anything. These are the people who are getting something, gives you the exact ratio, and it gives you the rule of exactly how this is happening. Right, so this is probably one of the best apps, and the coolest thing about it is you can even pick which madhab you're calculating according to. Hanbali, Shafi'i, Maliki school, and everything, because there are a few differences of opinions here. The name of the app is Al-Mawarith. Okay? Now this is cool, and you're like, I wish it's in Arabic, yeah. So you're like, I wish this was in English. Right? And alhamdulillah, we have some nice, really, really nice brother, mashallah, who decided to program something in English just like this. And you go to get it, you go to inheritance.ilmsummit.org, which is an Al-Maghrib institution. And this guy, mashallah, not even from the United States, he made this little calculator. And this calculator is really cool. You go ahead and you input, okay, wife, one wife, 2 daughters, 1 father, 1 grandfather, and then you go down. You're seeing this, right? Yeah. You go down, calculate inheritance. It gives you the shares. 1/8, 2/3, 3/24. Grandfather is blocked, so the grandfather got nothing. And it gives you the calculation rules. Same thing like this page. It lists out. So the father has blocked the grandfather from receiving any share. And that's rule number 13 on his website. Then the wife will get the prescribed share of 1/8. So that's rule 2B on his website. So he has a set of these rules. And to be honest, I only found this calculator after I already made my rule sheet. Otherwise, I would have just ripped off his rule sheet and not had to do all of this work. But alhamdulillah, it's very nice that he's done this job. So this is a pretty good calculator. So the question is, why in the world did I torture you by teaching you the least common denominator and all of these things? Because it's important for you to know and understand what's, how to actually get it done, and you'll have a better appreciation for, these calculators. If you just learn from the calculator, you don't have appreciation for what really goes into it, right? And these, there's very few of them, and they were made very recently, actually. So the thing is, when I studied this, we had to literally do all of this, not only by hand, we had to memorize every single rule, and you're not allowed to even use the rules on the test. So naturally, I'm going to be holding you to the same standard that I was taught, right? No, I'm not actually. No, I'm not. So the way it's going to be is this. Your multiple choice is open book or closed book? Closed book. So on multiple choice, you will not have any detailed calculation questions. But you will have questions which are important from the theoretical aspect of the nature of inheritance. Of like what happens and why this many people are getting this, or what kind of shares are there. So if I say here's some fractions, 1/17, is that one of the fractions that somebody receives? You're like, no. Because you know that. How many shares are there, fixed shares? 6 fixed shares. If I talk something about residual, and this residual happens and the father is inheriting by residual, and there's 5, 6 that's already been distributed, you need to figure out what the residual is. And what's the residual? 1/6, right? So things like that, very simple basic questions. In the free response questions, that's when you have open notes or closed notes. The notes are open. That's when you're going to get the nice, tough, tricky questions. But here's the thing. You're going to say, oh, well, I can use the app. Yes, you can use the app. But what you cannot do is you cannot not show your steps and just use the app and plug it in there. So I would like to see the steps of how you've actually calculated it to make sure that you understood, and you use the app to double check your results. Okay? It's not going to be that tricky. It's not going to be that hard. But you know whether you got it right or you got it wrong in the end. Okay, so that's what I would like everyone to focus on, understand. Lastly, before I open it up to questions, so the thing is, how is this all going to apply? It's going to apply only if you have a will. Now, how do you get a will done? There's 2 ways to make a will. 3 ways to make a will. One of them is, you simply just write it down by hand, write a paragraph, get it signed by some witnesses, you keep it at home. That will, is it even going to count in the state of California? Yes, it can count. Right? Like in the olden days, it can count. Right? But it may not count. Right? If there's a dispute or something else that happens, it may not count. So there's no really proper guarantee. So if you want to tighten up your will, make sure that you've calculated things into consideration and everything, then there is a cheap way of getting that done. And that is, you wait until IIOC releases its will, which is going to be distributed throughout the United States of America. Or you go, and since you already missed the Groupon deal, you go and you buy Quicken Will Maker Premium Edition for $20, which now it's like 30, 40 bucks or something, and you go ahead and you do your own will here. But if you have a large estate and you have a lot of money, you want to figure out a way to avoid what's called probate. Okay? So what is probate? Anyone besides the people who are lawyers in this room? Tell me what probate is? Yes. It goes to the court, right? So when your case goes to court because someone's disputing it or some other issue happened, you want to avoid going to court because that's where things get, tough, and you're going to start paying lawyers' fees, and it's going to become sticky, and your will may not apply. So what you do is, this can work in many cases. It's a cheaper way. If you want to avoid probate, there are 2 ways. One of them is to structure your will with the way of avoiding probate, or you get what's called a trust. And a trust can be made, and usually whoever's going to be making a trust, you really have to go to a lawyer if you have a large estate. And that's where we have, alhamdulillah, some lawyers in the community who do specialize in this type of thing. One is our sister who's going to be specializing. We have Omar Rangoonwala, for those of you who know, he also does trusts. And we have Brother Ahmed Sheikh. And before that, Todd Gallinger used to do trusts, but he told me stop doing them. So anyways, those are wills. Right? So what is in your will? All right? You say, well, I just wrote a two-page will. My will, 2-sentence will. My will is, I want all my inheritance to be distributed according to Islamic law. Period. Sign it. Everything's good to go. There's a lot more that goes into a will besides that. So an example of a will, for example, First, you're going to start with revoking your previous wills. Because you're not, any other will that you have made in the past, if another one pops up and someone says, look, I found this other will and you haven't revoked the other wills, you have a problem. Right? You talk about your marital status, your children, the disposal of your property, how it's going to be disposed. You name your executors, what powers the executors, can actually have, how your debts should be paid off, how your taxes are going to be paid off, because yes, there are taxes. No contest provision, severability, all these different things which are in the will need to also be taken into consideration. I think that was it. So I'll open it up to questions now, inshallah. Yes. Okay. So that's 2 questions. So the first question is, what if you have no relationship with that person? Or what if you don't like that person even? Right? You say, we got into a fight and I don't talk to my brother anymore. And he happened to be one of the heirs. Right? And it's, I don't like him and we had a big fight and we cut each other off. Right? In Islam, you cannot cut anybody off. Right? You're not supposed to cut them off. You cannot cut them off. They still have a right to inherit from you. So you cannot exclude them for any reason, no matter what. Say, well, they stole something from me. Okay, even with regards to that, they shouldn't be doing that, but you cannot cut them off. There's very few circumstances which you could cut somebody off from. Very, very rare, almost not likely to happen, but if you think it's gotten to that level, you come in, you ask Sheikh Faqih, say, you know what, is this a great example? And he'll probably say, no, it's not, but we need to sit down right now and get some counseling so you can resolve this family problem. Okay? As to life insurance, beyond the scope of this class, so we'll talk about it later, inshallah. Yeah. So if the bequest would be valid for somebody who does get blocked, then it could be valid, otherwise it's not going to be valid. So even if they support you being a Muslim, a non-Muslim family member or something, the general rule, the majority opinion has still been, they still do not inherit from you, and you do not inherit from them. That's been the traditional rule. But like I said, there is a discussion on this, whether to take the other opinion, on whether that was not the general rule, that was only for people who are at war. So inshallah, once we, establish this kind of, uniformity of opinion in the, at least in Southern California, we'll have a more clear answer for you. But the European Fatwa Council at least says that you do inherit. Yeah, if they gift you money, no issue. All right, so you ask them to gift it to you, or you ask them to bequest it to you. Still works. Same thing. Even husband and wife, due to the religion. Yeah, because the thing is, if this is the traditional opinion, this is the majority opinion. Because even if your wife is, let's say, Christian, she's going to be inheriting from the other Christian. See, the reason for this, and it kind of makes sense, is in the past, the Christians would not be inheriting to a Muslim. It was against their way of doing things. Same thing with the Jews. They're not going to be inheriting out. It doesn't matter if you're a family member or not. Right? So the thing is, it's been that way, is that if you're not going to be inheriting generally and you're not going to be inheriting back either, there's an exclusion process that goes both ways. Right? Now we have, everyone has their own, way of looking at things. Right? People say, well, I don't agree with that part. Or the Pope said this. Oh, well, I'm Catholic, but I don't agree with that part. So I'm just going to follow whatever I want to anyways. So that's the kind of new trend that we have. So, we can't take all those scenarios into consideration for the general rule. That's been their understanding. Okay. As for the other opinion, Allah knows best, but it has some weight. But I'd rather, have consensus on it before we actually tell people that you should follow it. You cannot disown a child. Yes, the question is, she saw in newspapers, and maybe this is culture or Islam, you cannot disown a child in Islam. Remember when we covered this zihar, about when you disown your wife because she's like the back of your mother? It's the same kind of thing. Same principles. Where what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran regarding this? Stop saying this. This doesn't mean that your wife is like your mother. This is ridiculous, right? Exactly. Okay, so responsibility of uncle towards the wife, since he's getting more inheritance. So it all depends on how many remaining family members there are and what the family situation is. So there's direct responsibility, indirect responsibility when we talked about marriage, right? So the thing is, the uncle's not only getting the inheritance. So it's a mistaken way to think that because this person is getting more inheritance from this deceased person, that they have a responsibility on the other people who are getting less. That's not what I meant when I was explaining it. What I meant is that they have more responsibility to their own family. So what happens is when other people die, and there's other disease, this money is coming to this person, this money is coming to this person. So this money came and this person got more from the other people, this person got less from the other people. Now this person goes and starts another family or expands the family, they have more responsibility towards their general family. This person who got less, when they go and start another family, get married, they're going to have less responsibility generally than this person, and that's why they got less and they got more. So it's not always within the same family of that deceased person. You look at all the people who are going to be deceased, and when they go and have other family relationship with other people, get married or whatever it is, that's how it's going to balance out. Not only within one deceased estate. We said if the husband is alive, then do these women get precedence or they do not get precedence? Same thing applies. So even if the second one dies, we said, let's say mother and father both die, that line that we mentioned in the notes, still child custody will go precedence to these people because the mother is not alive anymore. We said if the mother doesn't get remarried, so the mother is not alive and the father is not alive, these are the female relatives. If they're unmarried, they're going to be getting precedence, right? And then we said once they reach the age of maturity, then things change because whoever is going to be more pious position to raise the child properly. Right? So we covered that. So generally, when you're calculating inheritance, it's according to the market value or the current value of the house. Now, if you've delayed, the calculation, it's there's probably two opinions, but whichever one you should follow has to do with the reasons for the delay. So this is a scenario where you should go and sit down with a scholar and say, this is why it got delayed. These are the reasons. If there's some foul play on one side or there's a suspected foul play on the other side and the thing went up in value or went down in value, you have to decide why it was delayed and which opinion to follow due to that. Whether it cannot be purchase value. It's either going to be the market value now or the market value when the person initially passed away. But you have to figure out, there's a detail why it was delayed. Right, so there's many reasons for delay. Not if the son's okay. If all the heirs okay it. All of them. Your parents, your brothers, your uncles, everybody across the board okays it. Yeah. Otherwise, the thing is, if they're going to okay a redistribution of inheritance, it's just like them giving a gift. You just tell your kids, okay, whatever you inherit, give a gift to the one that you think should have had more. That's the best way to do it, right? So if they were really going to okay it, they could just gift it to them. So here, I'm giving you a gift. Right? And it doesn't have to be exactly the same amount. Right? You say, well, you need more, I'll give you more. If you need less, I'll give you less. Whatever is needed. So it's not like you're trying to recompensate or something like that. You just simply give what they need. The grandkids can still inherit. It just depends on how many people are there and if they're being blocked by somebody else. So it depends on what kind of grandkids they are, how many generations down they are, and whether other people are going to be blocking them. They can still inherit, yes. It depends if there's going to be females down the line and how many lines down they are in terms of grandchildren. Can be great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. So it all depends. No, they get a separate share as grandchildren. They're not receiving the same share like a father or something like that. It's going to be a different share. Right, depending on how many people are present. So there's a lot more rules involved. So if you look at all the rules, check out all the rules that were listed here, which we didn't calculate all of them. Check out these rules and then put in a few test cases into a calculator and see what they're going to be getting. Because remember, there's decrease and exclusion. So when there's presence of some people, it can go down and some people can be blocked as well. They can be excluded. Yes. So adopted kids, they're the best way they don't automatically inherit. So what you do is you use the bequest for them. That's the whole point. That's one of the main things where people use bequest. Right? Because when you say adopting a children, it's more like you're taking care of them, but they're not 100% your children. But you can bequest them. You can give them a bequest as well. Up to 1/3, which is still a lot. So it's still a lot. So gift giving we talked about. There is giving gift, right? Retraction of gift, giving gifts and everything. What is the limit of that? So as long as the same principle applies like bequest, you're not trying to deprive other people of their inheritance, then you can give any type of gifts that you want. But make sure you're not depriving anybody else. You're not depriving your heirs of their inheritance. Okay? Yes. Oh, should the judge be removed from the case if he's potentially, going to be judging if he's a potential heir? That could be a case, but not always. Let's say you have in a village, he's the only judge who's qualified. So what do? You got to go to the most qualified person. There's no one else who's qualified. Yeah, I understand. So the opposite is, in case you give the death verdict and he actually deserves it, then you're not going to be getting that amount of money, right? Because it's intentional murder. So generally, it's best for him to not judge the case. But if there's no other judge present, hey, that's, he's still going to survive. If you're a judge, past or present, you're financially okay. Right? If you're a judge, you've generally been okay because it's hard to get to a position of a judge. Right? So you'll survive without inheritance. Yeah. It depends on how much the bequest is, up to 1/3. It doesn't have to be 1/3. Let's say it's 1/3. Yes. So what you do is this: you subtract the amount. So let's say we have 1/4, 1/2, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/2. 3 people survived, and there's a bequest, right? And there's $10,000 left, and they distributed 1/3. So what you do is you subtract 1/3 from 10,000, and you're left with what? 6,667 or 66 points, whatever, right? And now you divide 1/2, 1/4, and 1/4 from that remainder. That's how you distribute the rest, inshallah. So that's the one exception to the rule, right? So if your children leave Islam, then they can be excluded. Who else? Yeah, Noreen. Why would an inheritor refuse their share? Right. So technically, that's like a gift. So in Islamic system, what's going to happen is it's going to automatically be transferred, and then they just transfer it back. In this case, if they say, no, I don't want it at all, and they sign a document or something, it never got transferred, then it's like the same thing, it's like them gifting it to whoever. But technically, even though it wasn't transferred into their account, it's considered their possession for even a moment of time. And then they transferred it off to somebody else. So do you have to liquidate the property that's going to be distributed? You don't need to, as long as you're fairly distributing the property. So it doesn't need to be immediately liquidated. If all the people in the household agree that, look, we don't want to sell this house because it has, sentimental value, right? Then, we don't have to, sell it right now. You can cooperate that way. But if you have a rift in your family, and there's a big fight breaking out, you will have to liquidate the house in order to distribute the assets. So if everyone cooperates, everything's going to be fine. If they don't cooperate, then yes, you have to liquidate the assets. The ratio? Remainder, there is no ratio. So what you do is you calculate, you add up all the shares, and whatever the leftover, 1 minus the all added shares, equals the remainder. So the remainder can end up being any number. It can be 5/16, it can be 132, it can be 1/4, it can be 1/2. It all depends on what the other shares are coming out to. Fixed shares first are calculated, and remainder is only if there is something remaining. If there's nothing remaining, it's 0. If there is something remaining, it can be 1/8, it could be 1/6, it could be 1/4, it could be 1/28, it could be any number. Okay? We did that. Remember, you go 1 minus and you add up all the shares and you get the remainder, inshallah. Alright, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.